Well, welcome back to our trek through the Bible in a year. Now, this week, our reading is going to take us from Genesis 49 through the first 12 chapters of the book of Exodus. And again, this is what I want you to be looking for. In this chapter, Genesis 49, we're going to see that Jacob, who is now, remember, his name was changed to Israel, from heel grabber to God's defender, Israel. He's blessing his 12 sons prophetically. And you take note of the blessing again, like I mentioned before, of the fourth son, Judah, whom it is promised that the scepter, that is the kingly rule, would come until Shiloh. And so he would rule until Shiloh. And the study of Shiloh's, that's a reference to the coming of the promised Messiah, who will come and reign and sit on the throne of David. And David was of the tribe of, here it is, Judah. So the scepter will never leave the tribe of Judah. So all this from this guy. And what's interesting is, remember, Judah, he's the guy that messed up morally back in chapter 38 with his daughter-in-law. But do you see the mercy and forgiveness of God, even upon sinful man? Boy, take that to the bank. Well, Israel passes away, finally, in this last chapter of Genesis, as does his son, Joseph. And Joseph, this sets us up for Exodus, because the book of Exodus begins with this rise of this new Pharaoh who did not know Joseph, did not know the story. And so, therefore, we're going to have a problem. So what happens is, remember, the children of Israel are living in Egypt in the land of Goshen, at least at this time. But because they were being blessed by God, and so they were herdsmen. Matter of fact, even the word Hebrews means the ones who's crossed over. And by this time, these were the ones, these children of Israel were starting to be called the Hebrews. They're seen in ancient pictures with the beard, where the Egyptians would be clean shaven. In other words, guess who built those pyramids? Because the Egyptian Pharaoh becomes so threatened by the growth, the largeness, and the blessing of these Hebrews living in Goshen, that he enslaves the whole lot of them. And they become slaves for over 400 years. And they grow from a family of about 70 to, indeed, a nation of 12 tribes. Well, God hears their pleas for deliverance. And yes, you're going to read Moses is born. But you're going to see that the uniqueness of his birth is that it turns out he's actually adopted into the family of the Pharaoh by the daughter of the king, the daughter of Pharaoh. And he's raised and he's educated in that world until he's reminded as a young man that he is of that world, but is really of another world, the children of Israel. Well, one day he sees an Egyptian beating a slave, and so he kills him. But because the word gets out, he's got to run. So he flees the area, and he later becomes a sheep herder. That is, until he runs into that famous burning bush, which you will read about. And it's from that burning bush God calls him to deliver his people out of slavery, out of Egypt. So Moses and his brother Aaron become the mouthpieces of God, and they go to Pharaoh to demand the release of the people. Well, you could guess. Pharaoh doesn't respond very well, because these people, well, they are his workforce. And you're going to see a progression. As you go through Exodus, you're going to see this. Again, it's going to say, Pharaoh hardened his heart. With each plea for the release, Pharaoh hardened his heart. Pharaoh hardened his heart. Pharaoh hardened his heart. But then suddenly you're going to start seeing, and God hardened his heart. And God hardened his heart. And then God hardened his heart. You're going to read about the 10 plagues that God will bring upon Egypt. Remember, with each of those plagues, each plague is pointed to a false god worshipped by the Egyptians. So God's bringing his judgment not only upon the people of Egypt, but their false worship as well. And in this, we're going to be introduced with the last plague, the 10th plague, the Passover. And what's interesting about the Passover, it is celebrated to this day by our Jewish friends. And this was the final plague that breaks the hold of Pharaoh over God's people. That's that night that was promised that the angel of death would pass over the homes of the faithful, sparing the life of the firstborn. by those who by faith believed God when God said, you take blood of an innocent lamb and you put it on the post of your home, and the angel of death will pass over. That's the term, Passover. But those who basically did not believe or trust or had any faith in God at all, the people of Egypt, well, that angel of death killed the firstborn, and that's included Pharaoh's firstborn, and that's what broke the back of Pharaoh, just like God promised. Well, anyhow, the drama continues because the people are now ready to exodus. That is, to leave slavery and leave Egypt. And we'll pick up that drama next week. But remember, study to show thyself a workman who need not be ashamed of himself, rightly dividing the word of truth. Keep on reading, keep on reading, keep on reading, and we'll pick it up next week.